Guillermo,
Mark,
what's up, brother?
good to see you, buddy.
It's good to see you, man. It's been a little bit. How we doing?
We're doing good. We're back in the saddle again,
Back in the
friends.
saddle.
Sometimes life gets in the way, but what do?
That's
We
it.
get
We just
we get
endure, man. We get it done.
get right back into this thing that we both love doing, talking about mindset, talking about better ways to live our lives, how to level up, how to be kinder to ourselves,
A
all
little
the
bit of
fun
self-ownership.
subjects, all about
Yeah.
self-ownership. But more importantly, what are we going to talk about today, buddy? What's on your mind?
So we talked about hope the last time you and I sat down. And I think it's like hope's evil twin in a way is fear. And so fear, look, man, I think it's the most primitive, basic emotion we've got. And let's give fear its due. Uh, it certainly serves a purpose, but obviously it has some limitations. So that's something we talk about in a roundabout way. We talk about fear all the time, you and I, but wanted to get an opportunity to be a little more direct with you about it today. So that's what's on my mind today,
All right.
Guillermo.
Well, I'm in. And so you know me, man. Because of my wordsmithing, I have to get into definitions and I have to get very specific,
Break out the
right?
Merriam-Webster, baby.
Yeah, in this case it'll be dictionary.com, but who cares, right? They're all pretty damn good.
They're all pretty
So,
close, I'm sure.
yeah, so when we're talking about fear, for everyone at home, we're talking about an emotion. It's a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain, etc., whether the threat is real or imagined, the feeling or condition of being afraid. How did that one go? You like that?
That landed perfectly. And I loved that last part, whether it's real or imagined, because whether it's real or imagined, it hits the same. And that's the worst part about it, Will,
Mm-hmm.
is even imagined fear arouses the parts of our brain that are associated with, impending doom, like real physical impending doom. So neurologically speaking, and I'm going to make this like really simple, it's like there's a part of your brain called your amygdala. We've talked about that before. That's stimulated by a threat, fear
Mm-hmm.
arousing stimuli, right? And then that releases sort of this cascading effect of these hormones, these stress hormones are released at things like cortisol and adrenaline, right? And that's really helpful when you're trying to evade a predator. But when you're just thinking about the presentation 2 weeks from now and your body's going into a state of sympathetic arousal. So your nervous system basically has two modes, right? So there's sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, which is activated by your amygdala. And then there's your parasympathetic, which we call sort of associate with rest and digest. And you're really never in one mode or the other. You're sort of vacillating between the two on a regular basis. But the trouble is fear pulls you so far to the sympathetic end of the nervous system spectrum that it begins to erode your ability to think clearly. It erodes your ability to really sort of suss out kind of whether or not this threat is real or imagined, which I want to get into some strategies to work through that towards the end of the show today. But that's the issue. And that's why I love the fact that that definition included real or imagined rather than just, a predator is chasing me.
Sure, 100%. An old saying, not mine, perception is reality. And that's really what the word we're going back to here is perceived. And, upon doing some research on fear and, going into the Old English and even the Germanic roots of the word, and it was actually spelled instead of F-E-A-R, it was F-A-E-R. So it was like fair, or instead of
There.
fear. But the actual definition, the actual root of the word actually meant calamity or danger. It actually meant like, oh crap, like, danger, like bear, you know what I mean?
I'm
Like,
about to die. Yes.
I'm about to die. And then the word got evolved over time into associating it with emotion. Because, like you said earlier, there are times when you are supposed to be afraid, right? Like, okay, big bear, and you're be afraid, like, and use those stress hormones like adrenaline, where you're going to try to run up a tree or something like that.
Fight the
But
bear.
yeah, exactly. But then something got evolved where, and I'll steal this one from a hypnotherapist coach that I said, that I asked once about with phobias, because I asked her, I was like, oh, do you do phobia work? She goes, oh, absolutely. I love doing phobia work. And I was like, So what's the story with like arachnophobia, right? Which is in the top 10. We can get into actually those fears if we want later. But I said, what does a person see when they see a spider in your experience? She goes, you see a little tiny speck. It's it's the size of a car to them. It
Hmm.
is literally like, as we've talked about in the past, like making a mountain out of a molehill. Like they're making it such a big deal in their head, their perception, the view in which they see that little spider. And please, I'm not trying to make fun of people who have arachnophobia, right? I'm married to one. So, and that's my job, right? My job is to kill spiders. And
Kill spiders.
that's how I earn my paycheck around here. But I just think it's so interesting that it's that perception of like one person makes it into such a bigger deal than another, and it makes you wonder: can you train yourself to overcome that?
Yeah, well, you definitely can. All the research proves that you can, but that's the worst part about fear is, well, helpful and hurtful, best and worst, I guess, part about fear, because it narrows your focus in such a way. It's like if your field of vision, right? It's pretty wide. I can be looking at you on the screen right now, but I can also see a number of things in my periphery this direction. There's a wall over here, so there's not a whole lot of action to my right. Um, but when someone is in a state of hyperarousal or their sympathetic nervous system is on overload, when fear is just the dominant emotion, all that stuff in the periphery sort of fades away. It's all gone. The only thing I can see is what's in front. My vision becomes so narrow that even something, as you said, very small, like a spider, because of the fact that I'm so honed in, because it's so magnified, or it becomes so magnified that it's now all I can see. And yes, it looks like the size of a car and it means impending doom and death because that little daddy long legs packs enough venom to kill me and my whole family.
Interesting. And so, there's a term, right? Like a toothless tiger, right? And like, how do you take your fears, right? And kind of defang them, and it's something I work on all the time with my coaching clients, executives predominantly. And so I'm not doing things like phobias, right? Except for, of course, the number one fear in the world, which, again, I'm going to put you on the spot. And if you extra points, if you can actually give the technical name, but number one fear, what is it?
Public speaking, baby.
Very good. It's actually glossophobia. Did you know that?
Glossophobia. I was not aware
Glosso.
of that.
Yeah, glossophobia.
Glossophobia. All right.
Glossophobia is number one. So that one I deal with all the time. I really kind of more what we would call getting people calm, clear, and confident in their communication, right? And making them hopefully one day be completely fearless, but even if getting them to just overcome their fears first and foremost. But that's the number one fear in the world right now, followed by heights, flying, spiders, and snakes. I do not handle heights, flying, spiders, and snakes, but man, oh man, people
Lots of
keep coming up.
glossophobia.
Lots of
Well,
people afraid to speak.
I think it's very safe to say that all of those reverse engineer to a variation of fear of death.
Whoa.
Because if you think about public speaking, even, right? Thousands upon thousands of years ago, when we didn't have things like symposiums, there were really no actors or anything like that. If you were called up to speak in front of your tribe, chances are you were sort of playing defendant for your life. You were placed in front of the tribe. You were going to speak on behalf of essentially your survival. So public speaking, in a way, and this is a theory that I think holds up. So public speaking, our very primitive brain, and that's one thing I want to get into, is our brain hasn't really updated through the thousands of years since we've been here. Engaging with our environment and with our communities and our tribes, right? So we're working with very ancient hardware in, look, man, I mean, we talk about irrational fears all the time, but the idea that getting, all right, a plane, for example, right? We've talked about how a fear of flying should not exist. Like you're statistically more
Statistically,
likely,
yeah.
yeah, you're statistically way more likely to die on the way to or from the airport than you are when you're flying from New York to California. Thousands of planes take off and land every single day. But every once in a while, once every few years, one comes crashing down. But the idea that you're going to get into a metal tube and you're going to zoom three-quarters the speed of sound, 35,000 feet in the air, is completely outside of what humans would consider in their most primitive form to be a normal thing. So things that are abnormal equate to fear. So public speaking, abnormal. It's not something people do every single day. So it arouses this fear because it's outside of what's predictable, what's normal, what's everyday life.
Oof. And hey, listen, hats off to the aviation industry, right? 100 years ago, it wasn't normal for people like us to get into a tube, and so yeah, you're right. It is sort of on the newer side of things. Just in your own practice, share as much as you want. What do you think are some common fears that people, just show up with? And I certainly have some to share as well.
Yeah, rejection. I think rejection probably is top of the list. And another one that you can really reverse engineer down to, because we're tribal animals, rejection from your tribe probably equates to certain death.
Mm,
So, I work with a lot of young men, the number of young men who are afraid to take the next step in their lives, whether it's go for the job or ask the girl on a date or, uh, try to branch out to a new social group, it's really through the roof. And I think it's very much tied into the loneliness epidemic that we're witnessing among young men. But it all comes down, I think, to fear of rejection, Will, because these folks, now we're probably getting into another rabbit hole. We're so used to just connecting via social media and this frictionless means of connection that takes all risk out of the equation, that now if I have to go up to a person, let's just say asking a girl on a date,
yeah.
if I have to put myself out there and approach a young woman who I'm interested in and ask her a question that, that there's one answer I really want to hear, right? Because the alternative means that I am worthless, I'm disposable, right? Well, what good is my life now? And again, bring it all back to some variation of the fear of death.
Wow. And again, you know me, I always talk about being reductionist, right? If a person can feel the truth, which is that they're loved and they're worthy no matter what, then I always say that if you're loved, if you know you're loved and you know you're worthy, then you'll act accordingly. One of the ways that a person who acts accordingly regarding this rejection is like, it's okay to go up to a girl and ask her out, and she's like, "Oh no, thank you, I already have a boyfriend," or "You're not my type," right? Or whatever the excuses are. And you're like, "That's okay. Like I'm still Mark, or I'm still Will," right? Like it doesn't, just because you got rejected doesn't mean that you're a rejection. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure, sure.
and I think that's an interesting distinction, is that it's so much of this to me goes back to identity. And it's my favorite type of coaching is identity coaching. And this idea that it's not that somebody's afraid of public speaking, it's afraid of being judged, or they're afraid of disappointing others, or they're afraid they're not going to get the promotion, or they're afraid that they're going to get fired. And it all just keeps coming back to their identity, not that they're afraid of actually speaking. It's kind of the how it's going to land, because everybody wants to do a good job. But if they already know, no matter what, like, like again, like you cliche, right? You have a loved one who gives you a big, kiss right beforehand, or like a dad before their son gets up and bats. And it's like, you're loved either way.
Yeah,
Yeah, winning is more fun than losing. So try to hit a home run if you can. But either way, you're loved. So you're safe. And I think that's where it's going back to, again, from a primal standpoint, is if a person feels safe, then nothing can really hurt them. And then there's really nothing to fear.
sure. Well, so in the Old Testament and the New Testament, some variation of be not afraid,
Uh-huh.
fear not, right? How many times do you think that phrase is uttered between those two volumes?
Gosh, I
Just
think it's gonna be in the dozens of times.
365 times.
That's an easy number to
365
remember.
times,
They
right?
say
And
fear not.
some variation of "be not afraid" is stated or written 365 times between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and you cannot tell me that that number was landed on accidentally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to me because, really, when you want to think about what the antidote, to fear is it really is love. And it's, love for yourself, love for your fellow man, love for, it's really, the two things can't exist at the same time.
Mm, yeah.
They
Yeah.
kind of can't.
No, that's interesting. And we've talked about anger also, right? And anger, one of the upsides of anger, and there are few. I'm certainly no apologist for the emotion of anger, but one of the upsides is it can have this protective force, and it could be fear mobilized, right? And so when you think about love or a loved one, I mean, the fear that would be coursing through my veins if anyone or anything put my family in danger is immeasurable.
Hmm.
But that would most definitely be turned into a version of fear, or I'm sorry, a version of anger that is limitless.
Yeah, and we talked about that a couple episodes ago, right? That the underlying emotion of anger is fear, and so again, you're not angry. So excuse me, you're not really angry that somebody broke into your house. You're actually afraid that they're going to hurt your loved one. If you really want to get into I'm sure, yeah. I mean, again, I'm kind of mincing words here, but I think you get what my point is.
Yes,
It's
yes.
just that there is this fear of loss. There's this fear, ultimately, like you said, fear of death. And also, when you think about, the reason why we are hardwired to procreate and to have progeny is like so that we can live on. And the idea of somebody taking away, your loved one that you quite literally made, it's like,
Sure.
of course you're going to be afraid. Of course
Right,
you're going to live in that fear. But again,
right.
imagine being so afraid of losing, your little Billy or your little Sally that you wrap them in bubble wrap and don't let them go
Mm,
out of the house. Now, isn't that an interesting thing
that's
when
really
fear can go
interesting.
too far, right? Where it's
Yes.
like, or when you're doing everything for someone, what do they call that? Snowplow, snowplow
Snowplow
parenting or
parent.
something like
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? Where I just don't want them to mess up. I'm afraid that if I don't do it, then, well, now you're hurting their own growth now.
Right. So last night, my daughter, my wife, and I, we saw the live action Moana. Right. It was pretty good. Uh, The Rock is one of my heroes, to be honest. Like that guy's in his 50s and he's cut like a Ginsu. Um, but the theme of the movie really is the tension between fear and courage,
Mm-hmm.
because, and I'm not spoiling much, but the whole idea is that they live on this Polynesian island, and Moana, the chief's daughter, the princess, I guess, um, she she thinks that they need to go beyond the reef, off the island, and beyond the limits of safety, let's say, because things are starting to dry up on the island. The coconut trees are getting diseased. There are fewer fish, and beyond the reef, there's likely an abundance of fish. There's more food and whatnot. And her dad is very afraid of them and basically demands like no one goes beyond the reef, right? So fear is such a powerful thing, and they've done research with rodents, and I always do my disclaimer that humans are way more sophisticated than rodents, but certain parts of our brain, like our amygdala, for example, and our fear receptor, it's not that different, mammal to mammal. So they've done this research where, again, ethics aside, they food deprive mice. So they don't give them food for a somewhat extended period of time. And then in the cage, there's a food source in like the corner, let's say. So the mice see that and they start scurrying over towards the food source, and then they hear a loud bang, right? And so then they run back, they retreat, right? And then one or a couple mice, they might be a little brave. They start walking over towards the food again, but then again, a loud bang, right? And then they run back. Fear, right, is such a powerful thing that it will even direct animals and humans as well to avoid nourishment, to
Hmm.
retreat from the thing that they need to survive, because they think that It's like they prioritize that survival threat over the thing they need in the long run to survive, which is food in this case.
Phew. Man,
Yeah.
it is debilitating. It really is. I have a short little kind of poem that's attributed to Anonymous that I wanted to share with you around fear because I think it's going to land for you, but it'll only take me about less than a minute. So the short poem is: I am fear. I am the menace that lurks in the paths of life, never visible to the eye, but sharply felt in the heart. I am the father of despair, the brother of procrastination, the enemy of progress, the tool of tyranny, born of ignorance and nursed on misguided thought. I have darkened more hopes, stifled more ambitions, shattered more ideals, and prevented more accomplishments than history could record. Like the changing chameleon, I assume many disguises. I masquerade as caution. I am sometimes known as doubt or worry, but whatever I'm called, I am still fear, the obstacle of achievement. I know no master but one. Its name is understanding. I have no power but what the human mind gives me, and I vanish completely when the light of understanding reveals the facts as they really are, for I am really nothing. You see, if you have the courage to acknowledge your fears, you will be taking the first step toward controlling them instead of them controlling you. And if you take the next step toward understanding, you will be able to move past them to empathy, perhaps even to love.
Dang, dude. Mic drop.
It's a good one, isn't it? I read
That's
it all the
amazing.
time.
Attributed to Anonymous, huh?
Yeah, I really wish I could give credit to who wrote that beautiful one. There's
Golly.
so much wisdom in it. And yeah, it really is. I love the line about it being a chameleon and how it kind of takes so many different shapes, too.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And then it arrives at understanding being ultimately the antidote. And I think that's what we're really in the business of, particularly in the CBT community, is having an understanding of to what extent is this fear real? To what extent is it tangible? To what extent am I underestimating my own ability to navigate uncertainty? Because that's another thing about fear is it feeds on uncertainty. Your brain is just a big prediction machine,
Right.
right? So it's always trying to identify like what comes next. And when there's some uncertainty around that, there's a quote in a Bright Eyes song: if you can't explain something, it's best to be afraid. If you can't understand something, it's best to be afraid.
Whoa.
Great artist, Bright Eyes. Songwriter's name was Connor Oberst. I saw him a few months ago with my buddy out in California. Highly recommend anyone who has never heard Bright Eyes can get past really difficult vocals, but is down with like high quality songwriting and poetry. But yeah, so understanding and being able to analyze, because that's the other thing is I alluded to this before, where fear sometimes can counteract our brain's ability to see things clearly. And the part of your brain that's responsible for rational thinking is your prefrontal cortex, and it becomes less activated when your amygdala is on fire, when you're in that state of sympathetic arousal and fight or flight is in full gear. So being able to take a breath, take a second, take a step back. And if you think of it this way, the breath as a key, because when you're afraid, your breathing changes. When you're happy, your breathing changes. When you're anxious, your breathing changes. So we can use the breath as sort of the physically regulating part of the equation before we start engaging the cognitive parts, questioning like the validity of this fear, whether or not we're magnifying, whether or not we're underestimating our own ability to, again, navigate and work through the problem at hand, but taking a second and just
And I
and
think
then
it's
engage.
And again, I think it's really when you think about the concept of courage, right? And this is a quote from Nelson Mandela. Who doesn't like a good Nelson Mandela quote? You know, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave
Hmm.
man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. And I love those two words, triumph and conquer, because I think that's really what the job of the human is to triumph and conquer over our own self-imposed limitations and our fears. I think that's kind of the purpose of life, and maybe even the point of owning your life.
That's it, dude. Own your life. Be not afraid. 365 days a year.
Good stuff, man.
Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you.
All right, Will. Be well.
Be well. Till next time. What's on Your Mind is a production of Oil Media. Subscribe for more reflections, blogs, and podcasts at oylmedia.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.